Have you ever been judged not by what you can do, but by what someone assumed you couldn't do? Have you ever been invisible in a room full of people who should have seen your brilliance? What happens when the person everyone overlooks turns out to be the one person they desperately need? This is the story of Jamal Anderson, a young black software engineer who was labeled lazy, unmotivated, and just not committed by colleagues who never bothered to look beyond their own prejudices. They saw him as dead weight, a diversity hire who didn't deserve his place at the table. What they didn't see was that while they were dismissing him, he was building something extraordinary. Something that would eventually catch the attention of NASA itself. But before we get to the triumph, we need to understand the struggle. Because Jamal's story isn't just about coding brilliance or landing a prestigious contract. It's about the exhausting reality of being constantly underestimated, constantly having to prove yourself in spaces that were never designed for you, and what it takes to keep going when everyone around you has already decided you don't belong. Jamal grew up in Atlanta, in a neighborhood where the sounds of the city were as familiar as breathing. The MARTA trains rumbling past, neighbors calling to each other from porches, music drifting from open windows on summer nights. His mother was a nurse who worked rotating shifts, and his father drove trucks cross-country, gone more often than he was home. Jamal was the youngest of three, with two older sisters who'd both gone to college on scholarships and come back with degrees and determination. He'd always been the quiet one. While his sisters commanded attention, one became a teacher, the other a paralegal, Jamal found comfort in the glow of computer screens. He taught himself Python at 13, built his first app at 15, and by the time he graduated high school, he could write code that made seasoned developers take notice. His high school computer science teacher, Mr. Chin, had been the first person to really see him. "You don't just write code, Jamal," he'd said one afternoon, watching Jamal debug a complex program. "You think in code. That's rare. Don't let anyone tell you different." Jamal carried those words with him to Georgia Tech, where he earned his degree in computer science with a 3.7 GPA. He'd worked part-time jobs, taken out loans, spent countless nights in the computer lab perfecting his craft. He specialized in optimization algorithms and machine learning, drawn to problems that seemed impossible until you found the elegant solution hidden within the chaos. After graduation, he landed a position at Vanguard Solutions, a mid-sized tech company in downtown Atlanta that specialized in enterprise software. It wasn't Google or Microsoft, but it was a solid company with good clients and room to grow. Jamal was excited. This was his shot to prove himself in the professional world, to build a career doing what he loved. He started on a Monday in September, walking into the sleek office building with its glass walls and modern furniture, carrying his laptop bag and a nervous hope. The team he joined had 8 other developers, all white except for one Indian guy named Raj, and a project manager named Doug Mitchell, a man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and a perpetual look of mild irritation. Jamal noticed the looks immediately. The quick glances when he introduced himself, the polite but cool smiles, the way conversation seemed to pause when he approached. He'd felt this before, that particular energy that said you're different here, you don't quite fit, but he pushed it aside. He was used to being the only black person in tech spaces. He'd deal with it the way he always had, by being undeniably good at what he did. But there was something in the air that morning, something he couldn't quite name yet. A wait, a watching. The feeling you get when you walk into a room and realize the test has already started, and no one told you what you'd be graded on. Doug assigned him to work on a legacy system modernization project. Updating old code, fixing bugs, nothing glamorous but necessary work. "Just ease in," Doug said, his tone suggesting this was generous. "Get familiar with our systems. No pressure." Jamal nodded and got to work. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that some of his new colleagues had already made their assessments, already decided who he was and what he was worth. And those decisions, made in the first few days before he'd written a single line of code for them, would shape everything that came next. He also didn't know that late at night in his small apartment, he'd continue working on something else. A side project he'd been developing for over a year. An algorithm for optimizing satellite data processing that he'd started as a graduate research project and couldn't let go of. It was elegant, efficient, revolutionary in its approach. It was the kind of code that could change things. But none of his colleagues knew about that. They only saw what they expected to see. A young black man who, in their minds, probably didn't earn his place, probably got hired to fill a quota, probably wasn't as smart as his resume claimed. They were about to learn exactly how wrong assumptions could be. Jamal's first month at Vanguard Solutions passed in a blur of onboarding, code reviews, and trying to navigate the social dynamics of a team that seemed to tolerate rather than welcome him. He did his assigned work efficiently, fixed bugs faster than expected, and even identified several optimization opportunities in the legacy code he was updating. But something was off. His suggestions in team meetings were met with polite nods and then ignored. When he offered solutions to problems the team was discussing, there would be a pause, that particular weighted silence, before someone else would rephrase his exact idea and suddenly it would be worth considering. That's actually not a bad approach, Doug would say, crediting whoever had repeated Jamal's suggestion. Let's explore that. Jamal learned to recognize the pattern. His ideas needed a white cosigner to be heard. The real problem started around week 6. Jamal had been working late several nights, sometimes staying in the office until 8 or 9 p.m. Not because the work required it, but because he was also coding on his personal project, the satellite optimization algorithm. He'd bring his own laptop, finish his Vanguard work by 6, then spend a couple more hours in an empty conference room working on his passion project. He thought he was being discreet. He didn't realize that Colton, one of the senior developers, had noticed. Colton was 32, confident in that particular way of men who'd never been questioned, and he'd made it clear from day one that he wasn't impressed with Jamal. He never said anything explicitly racist, he was too smart for that, but his comments were always edged with something sharp. "Must be nice having all that free time," Colton said one morning, appearing behind Jamal's desk with coffee in hand. "I saw you here late last night. 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. That's dedication. Or is it something else?" Jamal kept his eyes on his screen. "Just catching up on some work." "Yeah, because from what I can see, you're actually pretty far behind on your sprint tasks." Colton leaned against the cubicle wall, making himself at home in Jamal's space. "Just wondering what's keeping you so busy if it's not, the actual job." "I'm on schedule with everything Doug assigned," Jamal replied evenly, though his jaw tightened. Sure. But being on schedule isn't really the Vanguard way, We're about exceeding expectations, going above and beyond. Colton's smile didn't reach his eyes. Just some friendly advice from someone who's been here longer. The microaggressions were constant. Comments about urban culture when Jamal mentioned growing up in Atlanta. Surprise when he referenced technical concepts, as if his knowledge was unexpected. The time Doug assigned him to update documentation, essentially busy work, while the rest of the team worked on a new feature launch. "You're still getting up to speed," Doug explained when Jamal asked about it. "This is good foundational work." Jamal had been there 3 months. He had a computer science degree from Georgia Tech. He'd already proven his capabilities, but he was still being treated like an intern. The breaking point started building in December. The company had landed a significant client, an aerospace consulting firm that needed a complex data processing system. It was exactly the kind of challenging project the team had been waiting for. Doug gathered everyone for the project kickoff meeting. Jamal sat at the conference table, his notebook ready, actually excited. This was the kind of work he'd been hoping for: complex algorithms, real technical challenges, the chance to prove what he could do. Doug outlined the project requirements. The client needed a system that could process massive amounts of sensor data in real time, identify patterns, flag anomalies, and integrate with existing aerospace infrastructure. It was ambitious, technically demanding, and honestly, Jamal already had ideas about how to approach it. Then Doug started assigning roles. Colton would lead the architecture design. Raj would handle the database optimization. Brad, another developer, would work on the API integrations. Sarah would manage the user interface. Each person got a meaty, challenging piece of the project. Doug turned to Jamal. "You'll handle quality assurance testing and documentation. Make sure everything's properly commented and we have good test coverage." Testing and documentation. Again. Jamal felt something crack inside him, just a little. "Doug, I'd really like to work on the data processing algorithms. I actually have experience with..." "Let's stick with what I've outlined," Doug interrupted, his tone pleasant but final. "Testing is crucial to this project. We need someone reliable on it." Someone reliable. The words hung in the air with all their unspoken implications. Not someone innovative. Not someone brilliant. Someone reliable, meaning someone they could safely tuck away in a corner doing work that, while necessary, required none of the creativity or technical sophistication the rest of the team would be showcasing. Jamal swallowed his frustration and nodded. What else could he do? But that night, alone in his apartment, he pulled up his personal project, the satellite optimization algorithm he'd been perfecting for over a year. He looked at the elegant code, the breakthrough approaches he'd developed, the solution to exactly the kind of problem Vanguard was now facing. And he made a decision. He'd keep doing his assigned work, playing the role they'd cast him in. But he'd also keep building his own thing. Because eventually the world would see what his colleagues refused to. 3 months into the aerospace project, things came to a head in the worst possible way. Jamal had been doing exactly what was asked of him. Writing test cases, documenting code, finding bugs that the other developers had missed. He did it well, thoroughly, professionally. But he was invisible in the process, his contributions taken for granted while others got credit for breakthroughs and innovations. Meanwhile, the project was struggling. Colton's architecture design was solid but conventional, nothing innovative. The data processing was slow, inefficient. The client had started expressing concerns about performance benchmarks. Doug was stressed, calling more meetings, pushing the team harder. Jamal watched it all with a growing sense of frustration. He knew how to solve their problems. He'd literally built a solution to this exact challenge in his personal project. But every time he tried to offer input, he was shut down. Just focus on testing, Doug would say. We need you to be the net, catching our mistakes, not trying to redesign the system. Then came the morning of the client presentation, March 15th. The aerospace consulting firm was sending their technical team to review progress. It was a crucial meeting. If the client wasn't satisfied, Vanguard could lose the contract. Doug had scheduled an internal run-through first, gathering the team in the main conference room to practice the presentation before the clients arrived that afternoon. Jamal sat in his usual spot, near the back, with his laptop open to take notes. Colton walked through the architecture. Raj presented the database solutions. Brad showed the API integrations. Everything looked polished on the surface, but Jamal could see the underlying issues. The processing speed was still too slow. The system wouldn't scale well. The client would notice these problems immediately. When the presentations finished, Doug asked for feedback. There was a long pause. Everyone could feel the elephant in the room. The system wasn't where it needed to be. But no one wanted to say it. Jamal took a breath and spoke up. The data processing bottleneck is going to be a problem. The client's going to notice the latency immediately. If we restructured the algorithm using a distributed processing approach with... Jamal, Doug interrupted, his patience clearly thin. We've been over this. The architecture is set. We're not redesigning the system 3 months in. I'm not suggesting a redesign, Jamal persisted, his frustration finally breaking through his usual careful restraint. I'm suggesting an optimization that could improve processing speed by at least 40%. I've actually already built a proof of concept that... You've built what? Colton interjected, his voice sharp with something that sounded like accusation. A proof of concept. For a distributed processing algorithm that solves exactly this kind of problem. It's based on machine learning optimization and... Wait. Doug held up his hand, his expression hardening. You've been working on code for this project outside of your assigned tasks? The room went very quiet. No, Jamal said carefully. This is a separate project. Personal work I've been developing for over a year. But it's applicable to... Personal work, Doug repeated, and now his tone had shifted into something cold. On company time? Using company resources? No, it's completely separate. I work on it at home on my own laptop. I just thought. You thought you'd go rogue and build your own solution instead of focusing on your actual job? Colton leaned forward, his voice laden with implication. That's interesting, Jamal. Really interesting. Because we've been wondering why you're always here late but your assigned work is just barely getting done. Turns out you've been moonlighting on some side project instead of being a team player. That's not true. Jamal's voice rose despite his attempt to stay calm. I've completed every task assigned to me on time with no errors. You can check my commit history, my test coverage reports. Barely completed, Doug interjected. You do the minimum required and nothing more. Meanwhile, you're apparently spending time and energy on secret projects. That's not how we operate here. Jamal felt the room closing in. This was being twisted, weaponized. He looked around the table, at Raj, who was staring at his laptop screen, refusing eye contact, at Sarah, whose expression was uncomfortable but silent, at Brad, who actually looked sympathetic but wasn't saying anything, and at Colton, who wore a smile that said gotcha. With all due respect, Jamal said, his voice tight with controlled anger, my performance reviews have been solid. I've found and fixed critical bugs no one else caught. I've improved test coverage across the entire project. And now I'm offering a solution to a problem everyone in this room knows we have, and instead of discussing the technical merit, you're questioning my work ethic. Don't make this about something it's not, Doug warned. Then what is it about? Jamal shot back. Because from where I'm sitting, It looks like I've been doing grunt work for 3 months while being told I'm not ready for real responsibilities. And now when I demonstrate that I actually can handle those responsibilities, that I've been building exactly the kind of solution we need, I'm being accused of not being a team player. You want to know what it's about? Colton leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. It's about focus. It's about commitment. It's about being present and engaged instead of half-assing your assigned work because you're too busy playing around with your little side hustles. The words "little side hustles" dripped with condescension and something uglier underneath. I have never half-assed anything in my life, Jamal said, his voice low and dangerous now. The careful restraint he'd maintained for months was cracking. I have worked twice as hard as anyone in this room, done everything asked of me and more, and dealt with your passive-aggressive comments and dismissive attitudes since day one. And you're going to sit there and call me lazy? No one said lazy, Doug started. You didn't have to say it, Jamal interrupted. It's been implied in every interaction, every assignment, every time my suggestions are ignored until someone else repeats them. You think I don't notice? You think I don't see how differently I'm treated? How my work is scrutinized while others get the benefit of the doubt? How I'm given documentation work while everyone else gets to build? The room was deadly silent now. Everyone knew what Jamal was saying, what he was calling out. And no one wanted to touch it. Doug's face had gone red. I think you need to take a break, Jamal. Step outside, cool down, and we'll discuss this later. No. Jamal stood up, his hands shaking with anger and adrenaline. I'm done pretending this is normal. I'm done accepting scraps and saying thank you. You want to know what's really interesting? The solution I built, the one you just dismissed without even looking at, is revolutionary. It's patent-worthy. It solves problems the entire aerospace industry is struggling with. But you'll never know that because you never even asked to see it. You just assumed I couldn't possibly have built something valuable. He grabbed his laptop and walked toward the door. If you leave this meeting, we'll have to reconsider your position on this team, Doug called after him. Jamal turned back and his smile was bitter. You've already reconsidered it. You decided what my position was on day one. You just needed an excuse to make it official. He walked out, leaving behind a conference room full of uncomfortable silence and one aerospace presentation that was doomed to fail. Jamal sat in his car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe through the rage and humiliation coursing through him. Part of him wanted to go back upstairs, apologize, play the game, keep his job. But a bigger part, the part that was exhausted from years of being underestimated, dismissed, and relegated to the margins, was done. He drove home in a daze and spent the rest of the day pacing his apartment, replaying the confrontation, alternating between anger and anxiety. Had he just thrown away his career? Would he be fired? Blacklisted? The tech industry was smaller than people thought. Word got around. But underneath the worry was something else, a sense of liberation. He'd finally said what needed to be said. He'd finally called out the truth everyone had been tiptoeing around. That evening his phone buzzed. A text from Raj. Man, that was intense. For what it's worth, you weren't wrong about the processing bottleneck. Client meeting was a disaster. They're not happy with performance. Jamal stared at the message. Part of him felt vindicated, but mostly he just felt tired. He opened his laptop and pulled up his personal project, the satellite optimization algorithm he'd been building for over a year. Lines upon lines of elegant code, representing hundreds of hours of work, late nights, and creative problem solving. Was good. Better than good. It was innovative, efficient, scalable. What if he actually did something with it? The idea that had been forming in the back of his mind for weeks suddenly crystallized. He'd been thinking about this as a research project, maybe something to publish in a technical journal or present at a conference. But what if it was more than that? What if it could be a product? A startup? His own thing? He spent the rest of the night not sulking, but planning. He researched intellectual property law to make absolutely sure his work was his own and not subject to any employment agreements with Vanguard. He'd built it entirely on his own time, on his own equipment, using no company resources. It was legally his. By morning, he drafted a provisional patent application and started researching small business licenses. 3 days later, he received an email from HR scheduling a meeting to discuss recent events. He went in prepared for termination, his resignation letter already written in his bag. But what happened in that HR meeting changed everything. Doug was there looking uncomfortable. So was Colton for some reason. And Barbara Chen, the HR director, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. Jamal, Barbara began, her voice carefully neutral, we wanted to discuss the incident in the meeting last week. Some concerning allegations were raised about your conduct and work performance. Here it comes, Jamal thought. However, Barbara continued, and there was something different in her tone now. Before we proceed, I need to ask you directly. The algorithm you mentioned, the personal project. Can you tell me more about that? Jamal blinked, confused by the question. He'd expected to defend his outburst, not discuss his code. It's a distributed processing algorithm for satellite data optimization. Uses machine learning to identify patterns and anomalies in real-time sensor feeds. I started developing it during graduate research and have been refining it for about 14 months. And it's applicable to the work we're doing for the aerospace client? It's applicable to aerospace processing in general. Not just our specific client, but the entire field. Satellite data processing has been using essentially the same approaches for decades. My algorithm represents a fundamental shift in methodology. Barbara exchanged a glance with Doug that Jamal couldn't read. Would you be willing to demonstrate this algorithm? Show us what it can do. This wasn't how Jamal had expected this meeting to go. Why? Because after you left the presentation, I did some digging, Barbara said. I spoke with Dr. Raymond Clark, your former advisor at Georgia Tech. He's now a consultant. He had very interesting things to say about your work. Called you one of the most talented graduate students he'd supervised in 20 years. Jamal's eyes widened. You called my graduate advisor? I also reviewed your performance metrics, Barbara continued. Your test coverage on this project is 97%. You found and fixed 43 critical bugs. You've completed every assigned task ahead of schedule. So when I heard accusations about poor performance, I wanted to see the actual data. She turned to Doug and Colton, and her expression was significantly less friendly, which told a very different story than what was presented to me. Doug shifted in his seat. Colton's jaw was tight. So I'm asking you, Jamal, Barbara said, turning back to him. Will you show us what you've built? Not for them, she gestured dismissively at Doug and Colton, but for me. Because if what Dr. Clark says is true, this company may have been sitting on a gold mine without realizing it. Jamal sat back, processing. This wasn't termination. This wasn't discipline. This was interest, but he was also smart enough to be cautious. Before I show you anything, he said carefully, I need to be clear. This work is mine. I built it on my own time with my own resources. If Vanguard is interested in licensing or partnership, that's a conversation we can have. But I own it. Barbara nodded, a slight smile on her lips. Understood. And noted. Can you set up a demonstration for tomorrow? I can, Jamal said. But I'm curious, what changed between last week and now? Barbara leaned forward. Two things. First, your client presentation failed spectacularly. The aerospace firm is threatening to pull the contract due to performance issues, specifically the processing bottleneck you mentioned. And second, I don't tolerate discrimination in my company. When I started digging into why a highly qualified engineer was being relegated to documentation work, I didn't like what I found. She looked at Doug and Colton again. We'll be having separate conversations about management practices and team dynamics. But right now, I'm more interested in whether Jamal's solution can save this contract. So, gentlemen, tomorrow at 2 p.m. Conference Room B. Be ready to show us what you've got. Jamal left that meeting in a daze. He'd walked in expecting to be fired. He was walking out with a chance to prove everything he'd been saying all along. That night, he prepared the demonstration with meticulous care. Not just showing the code, but creating visual representations of the performance improvements, comparison benchmarks, scalability projections. He wanted them to see not just that it worked, but how revolutionary it was. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Barbara had also made a few other phone calls, including one to NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory where an old colleague worked, just mentioning what kind of technology a young engineer at her company had developed. Sometimes the truth doesn't just set you free. Sometimes it launches you into orbit. The demonstration the next day should have been Jamal's moment to prove himself to Vanguard Solutions. Instead, it became something much bigger and much more uncomfortable for the people who dismissed him. Jamal arrived at the conference room early, setting up his laptop and connecting to the projector. He'd barely slept, spending the night running final tests, perfecting his presentation, making sure every detail was right. This was his one shot to show what he'd built, what they'd been too prejudiced to see. At 1:55 p.m., people started filtering in. Barbara Chin arrived first, followed by Doug, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Colton came in with his arms crossed, his expression defensive. Raj and Sarah came too, along with a few other team members. Then, at exactly 2 p.m., two people Jamal didn't recognize entered the room. A black woman in her 50s wearing a NASA polo shirt, and an older white man in business casual with a JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, badge clipped to his belt. Barbara smiled. "Jamal, I'd like you to meet Dr. Michelle Carter from NASA's Advanced Computing Division, and Dr. Robert Hayes from JPL's Data Sciences Group. I took the liberty of inviting them since your algorithm deals with satellite data processing. I hope you don't mind." Jamal's mind went blank for a moment. NASA was here to see his work. He glanced at Barbara, who gave him the slightest encouraging nod. No, of course not. Thank you," he managed, his heart pounding. He launched into his presentation, and once he started talking about the code, the thing he built with his own hands and mind, his nervousness faded. This was his element. He showed them the problem first. Traditional satellite data processing was sequential, linear, inefficient. As data loads increased, processing times scaled exponentially. Current solutions tried to brute force the problem with more computing power, which was expensive and ultimately unsustainable. Then he showed them his solution, a distributed processing algorithm that used machine learning to dynamically allocate computational resources, predict data patterns, and process information in parallel streams. It was adaptive, learning and improving with each dataset it encountered. He pulled up live demonstrations, side-by-side comparisons. His algorithm processed a standard satellite data feed 47% faster than conventional methods. For complex anomaly detection, it was 63% faster. And it scaled linearly, not exponentially, meaning it could handle massive data loads without degrading performance. The room was dead silent except for his voice and the occasional click of his mouse. When he finished, there was a long pause. Dr. Carter spoke first. "How long have you been developing this?" 14 months, though the foundational research started during my graduate work at Georgia Tech. "And you've been working on this, where?" Dr. Hayes asked, leaning forward with interest. "At home. On my personal time and equipment." "Why?" Dr. Carter's question was simple, but the weight behind it was clear. "Why spend over a year building something like this on your own?" Jamal glanced at Doug and Colton before answering. "Because I love solving impossible problems. And because no one at my job thought I was capable of it." The words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Doug cleared his throat. "That's not exactly fair. Isn't it?" Jamal turned to face him directly, and months of suppressed frustration poured into his voice. "From day one you assigned me documentation and testing. When I offered solutions in meetings, they were ignored. When I suggested optimizations, I was told to stay in my lane. You gave me grunt work while telling me I wasn't ready for real responsibilities, despite the fact that I have the exact same degree from the exact same program as half this team. We were bringing you up to speed," Doug started. "For 6 months. Jamal's voice rose. "At what point was I going to be ready? At what point was my Georgia Tech degree going to count as much as Colton's degree from the same school? At what point was I going to stop being the diversity hire who needed to prove himself and start being treated like the qualified engineer I am?" "Nobody ever said anything about diversity," Colton interjected. "You didn't have to." Jamal cut him off. "It was in every interaction. Every dismissive comment. Every assumption that I was taking shortcuts or not working hard enough. You called my revolutionary algorithm a little side hustle. You accused me of half-assing my work despite metrics that prove I've been exceeding performance standards since day one. You questioned my commitment while simultaneously refusing to give me meaningful work to be committed to." Barbara held up a hand. "Jamal, can you walk us through the technical specifications? I want to understand the scalability potential." For the next 45 minutes, Jamal fielded technical questions from Dr. Carter and Dr. Hayes. They weren't softballs. They pushed him on methodology, on edge cases, on theoretical limitations. And he answered every single question with the confidence of someone who'd lived inside this code for over a year, who understood it not just intellectually but intuitively. Raj, who'd been silent throughout, finally spoke up. "I have to say something. I've worked with Jamal for 6 months. His code reviews are always thorough. His bug reports are detailed and accurate. He's never missed a deadline. And yet every time we assign project tasks, he got testing and documentation while the rest of us got architecture and design work." He looked at Doug. "We need to ask ourselves why that was." Sarah nodded slowly. "I noticed it too. But I didn't. I should have said something." "Yes," Barbara said firmly, "you should have. And that's something we'll be addressing company-wide. But right now, she turned to the NASA representatives, I'm curious what you think. Dr. Carter and Dr. Hayes exchanged glances. Dr. Hayes spoke first. This is impressive work. Genuinely innovative. The kind of advancement we've been looking for to handle next-generation satellite constellations. He paused. We'd like to discuss a potential partnership or licensing agreement. We need to run this through our technical evaluation process, but preliminary assessment? This could solve a significant problem for multiple NASA missions. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Doug's face went pale. Colton looked like he'd been slapped. Dr. Carter pulled out a business card and handed it to Jamal. I'd like you to come present this at our facility in Houston. Full technical review with our senior engineering team. We have budget allocated for exactly this kind of innovation. Can you do next month? Jamal took the card, his hand trembling slightly. Yes, absolutely. Good. She smiled, and it was warm and genuine. For what it's worth, I know exactly what you've been dealing with here. I've been the only black woman in too many rooms full of people who assumed I was the secretary, not the physicist. It doesn't stop hurting, but it does make you stronger. And sometimes, it makes you build something they can't ignore. After the NASA representatives left, Barbara turned to Doug and Colton. My office. Now, we need to discuss some serious management failures. She looked at Jamal. Take the rest of the week off. But you've earned it. And when you get back, we're having a very different conversation about your role here. But Jamal was already thinking beyond Vanguard Solutions. NASA wanted to see his work. NASA thought it was valuable. NASA saw what his own company had refused to see. As he packed up his laptop, Colton approached him. Look man, maybe I was harder on you than necessary. Jamal looked at him for a long moment. You weren't hard on me. You were dismissive. There's a difference. Being hard on someone means you have high expectations and push them to meet those expectations. You never expected anything from me except failure. And you made sure I knew it. That's not. Yes, it is. Jamal's voice was quiet but firm. And the worst part? You're not even the first. You won't be the last. But here's what you need to understand. Your prejudice doesn't define my worth. Your inability to see my talent doesn't make me less talented. It just makes you blind. And while you were busy dismissing me, I was busy building something extraordinary. So no, I don't accept your half-hearted maybe apology. But I do thank you for the motivation. He walked out of that conference room knowing everything had changed. Not just for him, but for how he saw himself and what he was capable of. The person everyone called lazy had just caught NASA's attention. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's undeniable excellence. 3 weeks later, Jamal stood in a conference room at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, presenting his satellite optimization algorithm to a panel of 15 senior engineers, data scientists, and program managers. His palms were sweaty, but his voice was steady. This was the most important presentation of his life. He'd spent those 3 weeks refining everything: the code, the documentation, the performance metrics, the presentation itself. He'd also hired a patent attorney to protect his intellectual property, taken meetings with a business advisor, and started the paperwork to form his own company, Anderson Aerospace Analytics. The NASA review was rigorous. They questioned every aspect of his methodology, stress-tested his assumptions, asked him to solve problems in real time with his algorithm. It was exhausting and exhilarating. When he finished, Dr. Carter, who chaired the review panel, smiled. Mr. Anderson, we're prepared to offer you a contract for initial development and integration testing. Pending legal review, of course. The preliminary budget is $2.3 million over 18 months. Jamal had to grip the table to keep steady. $2.3 million. For his work. For the algorithm everyone at Vanguard had dismissed as a side hustle. There's also interest from our Mars sample return mission team, Dr. Hayes added. They're dealing with massive data processing challenges for the sample collection rovers. Your algorithm could be transformative for that mission timeline. That would be a separate contract, pending the success of this initial phase. Jamal nodded, not trusting his voice. He'd walked into Vanguard Solutions 6 months ago hoping to build a career. He was walking out of NASA with a multi-million-dollar contract and the possibility of contributing to Mars exploration. The next day, sitting in his hotel room, he called his mother. "Baby, I don't understand all this technical stuff," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I understand that NASA thinks my son is brilliant. I always knew you were special, Jamal. Always." "Thanks, Mama." His own voice cracked. "I wish Daddy could have seen this." He sees it, baby. I promise you he sees it. When Jamal returned to Atlanta, he had decisions to make. Barbara had offered him a promotion at Vanguard, senior developer, significant raise, team lead position. It was everything he'd wanted 6 months ago. But 6 months ago, he'd still believed he needed their validation. He scheduled a meeting with Barbara in her office. She greeted him warmly, clearly expecting him to accept the promotion offer. "I appreciate everything you did," Jamal began. "Calling Dr. Clark, inviting NASA, addressing the management issues. You saw me when others didn't, and I won't forget that. But..." Barbara's expression shifted. She was smart enough to hear what was coming. "But I'm resigning. I've accepted the NASA contract, and I'm launching my own company to fulfill it. I can't do that while working here, and honestly," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I don't want to. I don't want to spend my career fighting to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. I'd rather build something where that's never a question." Barbara nodded slowly. "I can't say I'm surprised. Disappointed for Vanguard, but not surprised. You deserve better than what you got here." She extended her hand. "For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. And Jamal? Make them regret every moment they underestimated you." He shook her hand. "I already have." His last 2 weeks at Vanguard were surreal. Word had spread about the NASA contract. Suddenly, colleagues who'd barely acknowledged him were friendly, congratulatory, asking about his new company. Colton avoided him entirely. Doug was professionally cordial but clearly humiliated. On his final day, Raj took him to lunch. "I'm sorry," Raj said over sandwiches. "I saw what was happening. I knew it was wrong. But I stayed quiet because I was afraid if I said anything, they'd start treating me the same way. I know that's not an excuse." Jamal appreciated the honesty. "I get it. The system works by making everyone afraid to challenge it. You staying silent didn't create the problem, they did. But yeah, it would have been nice to have an ally. For what it's worth, you've changed things here. Barbara's implementing new management training, blind code reviews, restructuring how we assign projects. You leaving is costing them their best developer and forcing them to look at their culture. That's something." It was something. But Jamal knew it wasn't enough. One company changing policies didn't fix a systemic problem. But it was a start. 3 months later, Anderson Aerospace Analytics officially launched. Jamal hired his first employee, a talented Latina developer named Maria who'd been repeatedly passed over for promotion at her previous company despite leading successful projects. Then he hired James, a black data scientist who'd gotten tired of being the only person of color in every room. Then Keisha, a brilliant systems architect who'd left corporate tech after too many experiences like Jamal's. He didn't set out to build a diverse team. He set out to build a team of people who were exceptional and who'd been systematically undervalued. It just happened that most people who fit that description weren't white men. The NASA project moved forward successfully. Jamal's algorithm performed even better than projected. 6 months in, NASA expanded the contract. Other aerospace companies started reaching out: SpaceX, Boeing, Northrop Grumman. They'd heard about the young company solving problems the industry had struggled with for years. A year after leaving Vanguard, Jamal was interviewed for a tech industry publication. The journalist asked him about his success. "I'm not successful because I'm exceptional," Jamal said. "I mean, I'm good at what I do, but there are thousands of talented developers out there. I'm successful because I refuse to let other people's limited imagination define my possibilities. And because I got angry enough to prove them wrong." Do you have a message for young people of color trying to break into tech? Jamal thought for a moment. 2 things. First, you're not crazy. If you feel like you're being treated differently, judged more harshly, given fewer opportunities, you're not imagining it. The data backs you up. Trust your experience. Second, your value isn't determined by whether they see it. Build something so undeniable they can't look away. And if they still don't see it, build your own table. The article went viral. Jamal started getting invitations to speak at conferences, universities, tech meetups. He talked about his experience honestly, the microaggressions, the dismissiveness, the assumption that he was less capable because of his race. But he also talked about resilience, about building something meaningful, about refusing to shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed for you. 18 months after leaving Vanguard, Anderson Aerospace Analytics had grown to 15 employees and $8.7 million in contracts. They'd expanded beyond NASA to work with commercial space companies, defense contractors, and research institutions. And then came the email that made everything full circle. Doug Mitchell wanted to meet for coffee. Jamal almost deleted it, but curiosity won out. He agreed to meet at a neutral cafe downtown. Doug looked older, more tired. He ordered coffee, made small talk, then finally got to the point. Vanguard lost the aerospace contract, he said. The client went with a competitor who was using more advanced data processing. Your kind of processing, actually. Jamal said nothing. I'm not here to apologize, Doug continued. I should. I was a terrible manager to you. I let my own biases I didn't even realize I had, shape how I treated you. But an apology feels inadequate for what happened. So why are you here? Jamal asked. To tell you that you were right. About everything. And to say that watching what you've built, seeing your success, it's forced me to confront some ugly truths about myself. I don't know if that means anything to you, but I needed to say it. Jamal studied him. Doug looked genuinely remorseful, genuinely changed. Part of Jamal wanted to unload, to make him feel the weight of every dismissive comment, every microaggression, every moment of being made invisible. But he was tired of carrying that anger. It means something, Jamal said finally. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. The fact that you see it now, that's more than most people do. For what it's worth, I'm trying to do better. I'm taking courses on inclusive leadership, reading books about unconscious bias, really trying to understand how I contributed to a toxic environment. That's good, Jamal said. But the real test isn't what you learn, it's what you do with it. The next black developer who joins your team, the next person who doesn't look like you or talk like you or come from where you came from, how will you treat them? Will you see their potential, or will you see what you expect to see? Doug nodded. I'm working on it. That's all I can say. They finished their coffee mostly in silence. As they stood to leave, Doug extended his hand. Congratulations on everything you've built. You deserve better than what you got from us. I hope you know that now. Jamal shook his hand. I always knew it. I just needed you to know it too. 2 years after leaving Vanguard Solutions, Jamal stood on a stage at the National Society of Black Engineers annual conference in front of 3,000 people. He'd been invited as a keynote speaker, which still felt surreal. The kid from Atlanta who taught himself to code was now being held up as an example of black excellence in tech. But as he looked out at the audience, at the sea of young black and brown faces, students and professionals, people who knew exactly what it felt like to be the only one in the room, to have your competence questioned, to be called lazy while working twice as hard, he understood why his story mattered. They called me lazy, he began, his voice carrying through the convention center. Not to my face usually. That would have been too obvious. But in the assumptions they made, the work they assigned me, the opportunities they withheld. In the surprise when I exceeded expectations, as if excellence from someone who looked like me was unexpected. He paused, letting the recognition ripple through the crowd. They knew. They all knew. For a long time, I internalized it. I worked harder, stayed later, tried to be twice as good to get half the recognition. I code switched, made myself smaller, more palatable, less threatening. I did everything I was supposed to do to fit into spaces that were never designed for me. And you know what? It didn't matter. Because the problem was never me. It was never my work ethic or my talent or my dedication. The problem was their inability to see past their own prejudices. The audience applauded, and Jamal felt the energy in the room shift. So I stopped asking for permission to be excellent. I stopped waiting for them to see my value. I built something they couldn't ignore, and then I built a company where people like us don't have to prove ourselves before we're given a chance to contribute. He talked about Anderson Aerospace Analytics, about the team he built, about the conscious choices he made every day to create a different kind of workplace. Not perfect, nowhere was perfect, but intentional. A place where talent was recognized regardless of where it came from, where diverse perspectives weren't tolerated but celebrated, where calling something a diversity hire was understood as the insult it was. After his keynote, during the networking session, a young woman approached him. She was maybe 22, wearing a conference t-shirt and carrying a worn notebook. Mr. Anderson, she said nervously, I'm Imani. I'm a junior at Howard studying computer science. I just wanted to say, thank you for telling your story, for being honest about what it's really like. What year are you? Jamal asked. Junior. I'm interning at a tech company this summer, and honestly it's been really hard. I'm the only black woman on my team, and I feel like I'm constantly being watched, judged, like any mistake will confirm what they already think about me. Jamal recognized that exhaustion in her eyes. Are they giving you real work, or are they keeping you on the sidelines? Sidelines, she admitted. Documentation mostly. My mentor says I'm not ready for coding tasks yet, even though I've been coding since high school. Here's what I want you to understand, Jamal said. Their inability to see your potential is not a reflection of your potential. You are not required to shrink yourself to make them comfortable. And if they can't give you meaningful work, take that as data about them, not about you. Her eyes got watery. It's just hard. Sometimes I wonder if I belong in tech at all. You absolutely belong in tech. Tech needs people like you, people with different perspectives, different experiences, different ways of seeing problems. What tech doesn't need is more of the same people making the same assumptions and building the same solutions. He pulled out a business card. Email me. I want to see your portfolio. Anderson Aerospace is growing, and we're always looking for talented developers who are tired of being underestimated. She took the card with shaking hands. Really? Really? But here's the condition. You have to promise me something. When you make it, and you will make it, you reach back. You mentor the next Imani who's struggling. You build something that creates space for others. You refuse to let this industry stay the way it is. Deal? Deal, she said, and her smile was brilliant. That interaction repeated throughout the day. Young professionals sharing their stories of discrimination, of being overlooked, of being told they weren't good enough in 1,000 subtle ways. And Jamal listened, validated, and when appropriate, opened doors. That evening, back in his hotel room, he got a notification on his phone. Anderson Aerospace Analytics had just been featured in TechCrunch with the headline, How One Developer Turned Workplace Discrimination into an $18 million Aerospace Company. He read the article, which told his story accurately and thoughtfully. But what got him was the comment section. Hundreds of people sharing their own experiences, their own stories of being dismissed and underestimated, their own moments of deciding to build something better. His phone rang. It was his mother. Baby, you're in TechCrunch. My coworker's daughter sent me the article. She said you're famous in the tech world now. Jamal laughed. I don't know about famous, Mama. I'm so proud of you. Not because of the money or the NASA contract or any of that. I'm proud because you didn't let them break you. Because you kept believing in yourself even when no one else did. That's the real success. After they hung up, Jamal sat on the hotel bed, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. Somewhere in one of those buildings, a young black developer was probably working late, trying to prove themselves, dealing with the same dismissiveness he'd faced. Maybe feeling alone, maybe questioning if they belonged. He opened his laptop and started writing a blog post. Not about his success, but about the cost of that success. About the emotional labor of constantly proving yourself. About the toll of working in spaces that see you as less than. About the importance of creating alternatives, of building companies and communities where excellence isn't surprising when it comes from black and brown people, but expected. He ended the post with a call to action. If you're a developer, engineer, data scientist, anyone in tech, who's tired of being underestimated, reach out. Anderson Aerospace is hiring. So are a lot of other companies founded by people who got tired of asking for permission to be excellent. You have options. You have value. You have power. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. He hit publish and watched as the post started getting shares, comments, reactions. People finding each other, building networks, creating community. This was the real victory. Not just his own success, but the doors it was opening for others. The conversation it was forcing the industry to have. The young developers who would have an easier path because he'd refused to accept the status quo. They'd called him lazy. They'd dismissed his talent, questioned his commitment, relegated him to the margins. And in doing so, they'd created their own competition. They'd motivated him to build something they couldn't ignore, something that was changing not just his life but the entire landscape of who got to participate in aerospace technology. The person they'd underestimated was now the person they needed. And that wasn't revenge. That was justice. 3 years after walking out of that humiliating meeting at Vanguard Solutions, Jamal sat in his own office. A real office now, in a building Anderson Aerospace Analytics leased in Atlanta's tech corridor. Through the window, he could see the city he'd grown up in, transformed but recognizable, full of possibility and history in equal measure. His company had grown to 35 employees. The NASA contract had expanded twice. They'd won contracts with 3 commercial space companies and were in talks with international space agencies. Anderson Aerospace Analytics was now valued at $47 million and had been approached by venture capital firms about series of funding. But the numbers, impressive as they were, weren't what kept Jamal going. It was the text he'd gotten last week from Imani, the young woman he'd met at the conference. She'd graduated, joined his company, and just led her first major project. an optimization algorithm for satellite constellation management that NASA had praised as innovative and robust. In her text, she'd written, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. I'm reaching back now, mentoring a freshman at Spelman who's interested in aerospace engineering. The cycle continues." That was the legacy that mattered. Jamal's story had become public, shared in tech circles, written about in industry publications, discussed in diversity and inclusion training sessions. Some companies used it as a cautionary tale about the cost of bias. Others used it as inspiration for changing their hiring and management practices. But Jamal knew the truth. His story wasn't unique. It was common. Painfully, exhaustingly common. There were thousands of talented Black and brown developers out there right now, sitting in offices where their contributions were minimized, their ideas dismissed, their potential unseen. There were brilliant women being asked to take notes in meetings where they should be leading discussions. There were immigrants with advanced degrees being given junior-level work. There were LGBTQ+ engineers hiding parts of themselves to seem professional. The system that had tried to break Jamal was still breaking people every single day. But there was hope in the fact that more people were talking about it now. More companies, not all but more, were genuinely trying to create inclusive environments. More founders who'd been dismissed and underestimated were building their own companies, creating alternatives, changing the industry from the outside in. The statistics were still stark. Black professionals made up less than 5% of tech workers at major companies. The numbers were even worse at the executive and founder levels. Countless studies showed that resumes with Black-sounding names received fewer callbacks. That Black employees received less mentorship, fewer promotions, more scrutiny. But those numbers were starting to shift, slowly, incrementally, because people refused to accept them as inevitable. Jamal's phone buzzed. An email from Dr. Carter at NASA. Subject line, Mars sample return mission. Algorithm performance exceeds all projections. He opened it, scanning the technical details, the praise, the notification that NASA wanted to expand their partnership to include other planetary missions. His algorithm, the one Colton had called a little side hustle, the one his colleagues had dismissed without even looking at, was going to help bring samples back from Mars. The kid from Atlanta who taught himself to code in a cramped bedroom was now contributing to humanity's exploration of other planets. There was poetry in that, justice in that. But Jamal also knew that his success didn't erase the pain of what he'd experienced. The humiliation of that meeting didn't disappear because things worked out. The countless microaggressions, the constant need to prove himself, the exhaustion of being systematically underestimated, those scars remained. Success didn't heal those wounds. It just proved they should never have been inflicted in the first place. He thought about Doug, who was apparently still working at Vanguard, apparently actually trying to be better. He thought about Colton, who'd left the company after Barbara's investigation revealed a pattern of discriminatory behavior. He thought about the system that had enabled both of them, that had made it possible for talented people to be overlooked simply because they didn't fit someone's narrow image of what brilliance looked like. And he thought about all the Jamals who didn't get a happy ending, who internalized the message that they weren't good enough, who left tech entirely, who never got the chance to show what they could do because the doors stayed closed. His story ended well, but it could have ended differently. And for too many people, it did. That's what people needed to understand. The problem wasn't that Jamal faced discrimination. The problem was that he had to be exceptional, had to build something revolutionary, had to catch NASA's attention just to be seen as competent. The bar for people like him was always higher, the benefit of the doubt always smaller, the path always harder. And that wasn't a bug in the system. It was the system. Jamal opened his laptop and pulled up the job postings for Anderson Aerospace Analytics. They were hiring 5 more developers, 2 data scientists, and a project manager. The applications had been flooding in since the TechCrunch article. Hundreds of talented people looking for a place where their brilliance would be recognized, not questioned. He made a note to himself. Interview every single applicant who mentioned facing discrimination at previous jobs. Not because he wanted to build a company of victims, but because he knew those people had been forged in fire. They'd had to be twice as good to get half as far. They'd had to develop resilience, creativity, determination that comfortable people never needed. They'd been underestimated, which meant they had everything to prove and nothing to lose. That was the team he wanted to build. His phone rang. A video call from Maria, his first employee, who was now his VP of engineering. "Boss, we got it," she said, her face glowing with excitement. SpaceX signed. $12 million contract for satellite data processing across their entire Starlink constellation. They specifically cited our algorithm's efficiency and scalability. Jamal felt the familiar rush of vindication and pride. That's incredible. When do we start? Next quarter. But Jamal, there's more. They want to know if we can adapt the algorithm for their Mars mission communications infrastructure. They said if anyone can solve the latency issues they're facing, it's us. Mars again. Everything kept coming back to Mars. Tell them yes, Jamal said. We can figure out the details, but tell them yes. After the call ended, Jamal sat back in his chair looking around his office. On the wall was his Georgia Tech diploma. Next to it, a framed photo of his first NASA contract signing. And beside that, a printout of an email from a young developer he'd mentored, who'd just gotten promoted to senior engineer at her company. These were the markers of success. But the real success, the thing that made everything worthwhile, was the shift happening across the industry. The conversations about bias and inclusion that were becoming harder to ignore. The companies being forced to examine their cultures. The talented people refusing to accept less than they deserved. They'd called Jamal lazy. And in doing so, they'd motivated him to build something that proved exactly how wrong that assessment was. But more importantly, they'd motivated him to create space for others who'd been similarly dismissed. The system was still broken. Bias was still real. Discrimination was still happening every day. But there were cracks in the foundation now, light coming through. And people like Jamal, people who'd been told they didn't belong, who'd been underestimated and overlooked, were building something new in those spaces. One company at a time. One opportunity at a time. One person at a time. The question Jamal wanted to leave people with wasn't, how did he overcome? But, why did he have to? Why should talent need to be revolutionary to be recognized? Why should competence need to be exceptional to be acknowledged? Why should brilliance need to be undeniable before it's seen? The answer was uncomfortable, because the systems we've built assume certain people belong and others don't. And until we dismantle those assumptions, until we restructure those systems, people will keep having to be exceptional just to be seen as adequate. But here's what those systems don't account for. Underestimated people are dangerous. Because when you spend your whole life being told you can't, and you do anyway, you develop a strength that comfortable people never access. You develop a vision that sees possibilities others miss. You develop a determination that doesn't quit. They called Jamal lazy. They were wrong. And their wrongness cost them a brilliant engineer, a revolutionary algorithm, and a chance to be part of something transformative. His success was his own. But their failure? That was on them. And maybe, just maybe, that failure would teach them something. Would make them question their assumptions the next time. Would make them see the next Jamal for who they actually were, not who they expected them to be. Jamal closed his laptop and stood, walking to the window. The Atlanta sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and purples, the city lights beginning to glow against the coming darkness. Somewhere out there, a young person of color was doubting themselves, wondering if they belonged in tech, questioning if their dreams were realistic. And somewhere out there, someone was proving that yes, you do belong. Yes, your dreams are valid. Yes, you can build something extraordinary. Not despite being underestimated, but because of it. They'd call you lazy, or unmotivated, or not a cultural fit, or a diversity hire, or not ready, or not quite what they're looking for. And you'd prove them spectacularly, undeniably, beautifully wrong. That was the message. That was the hope. That was the revolution happening, one code commit, one contract, one open door at a time. Jamal picked up his phone and opened Twitter. He typed out a message. To every young developer being told they're not good enough, you are. To everyone being dismissed and overlooked, they're wrong. To anyone questioning if they belong in tech, you do. Build something undeniable. The industry needs you more than you need it. Don't let them convince you otherwise. He hit send and watched it go out into the world, knowing it would reach someone who needed it. Someone who was sitting where he'd sat 3 years ago, hurt and angry and ready to give up. And maybe that someone would decide to keep building instead. To prove them wrong. To create something better. That was how systems changed. Not all at once, but one person at a time, refusing to accept the limitations others tried to impose. They'd called him lazy. His code got him a NASA contract. And in doing so, he'd helped rewrite the story of who got to dream about the stars. But really, it's just the beginning. Because Jamal's story isn't over, and neither is the fight for true equity in tech. The revolution continues, one line of code at a time, one open door at a time, one person refusing to be diminished at a time. And that changes everything.